a mind to open up and to look to me, the living God. For as I move by my presence in thy midst today, I do these things to refresh thee, to acquaint thee with that of the reality that I am a God that is alive, and I'm alive forevermore. And as I refresh thy spirit, it is through the flowing of the waters of everlasting life that thy soul is sustained through the journey and through the turmoil and the many things thou encounterest in thy walk and way of life. Little ones, come and drink of this water. For I say unto thee, it is the water and the only water that shall quench thy thirst and sustain thee for the end of time. For it is on the hand of time, and I, the Lord thy God, have spoken it to be so, and I shall bring it to pass. Thou shalt see my coming, and the time is drawing nigh at hand, saith the Lord.
Thank you, Jesus.
One of these evangelists of our modern day, according to his articles in here, he's traveled extensively in the Holy Land. He's talked with some of the main government figures over there. The man has an article in here, and this is the thing, brothers and sisters, that sets me in the mood to deal with this subject. The man of sin, that's taken from 2 Thessalonians. The translation of that means lawless one. The Bible has approximately 12 different prophecies that deals with this human character that's to make his appearance here in the end time, just before the coming of Christ. In some places he's referred to as the Antichrist. In other places he's referred to as the false prophet. Paul referred to him as the man of sin. Daniel referred to him in the 9th chapter as the prince, meaning the false prince. In Daniel 11, he's referred to as an evil king. In Daniel 7, he's referred to as a horn that has the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. It's referred to also in 2 Thessalonians, the mystery of iniquity, which was already at work. That's not pointing to the man, it's pointing to the spirit that brings the man on the stage in time. Now, it's very strange how that in these last days modern preachers have laid aside many of the things that the older generation of preachers back, say, 60, 70, 100 years ago used to preach about the Pope being the Antichrist. We've got a political thing going on today that seems to be something that preachers likes to play with, because it is a political move. It's called the New World Order. And I don't want to make what I'm saying this morning that I'm naive about a New World Order. As far as what politicians have in their mind, they have every intention of bringing about a New World Order, because that's their plans. Every time you hear of a plant, of industry in the United States shutting down and shipping its product to be manufactured to some other country, that's part of the New World Order. But we must also understand this. What man plans and what God has already said is two different things. God will let man do certain things, plan certain things up to a certain point in time. And then he just seems to throw a finger out there and wreck the whole process. in mind, brothers and sisters, the United States has foot the bill for this United Nations thing for many, many 50 years now. But if you for 1 minute can think that there's going to be a universal new world order, it would be easier for you to get China to go to church than you can get the whole globe into a new world order. Now I want you to think seriously on that. Many of these modern preachers are saying the only way Rome is revived is just certain characteristics of what used to be Rome. This is also preached among some of the, we will say, the Messianic Jews for Christ. That the 10 horns that was in ancient time is only symbolic of how the world will be divided into 10 different jurisdictional territories. That is one way of saying it. But the Bible don't even give you that kind of a picture. Right here is the National Geographic's map of the Roman Empire. It bordered all of Africa. The shaded areas, that was when it was at its highest, its entirety. Now with that in mind, I want to read to you. I'm not preaching his message, but I want to show you, brothers and sisters, how modern preachers are thinking today. That there's going to be one man, the Antichrist. He's going to be the political leader of the New World Order. And then, some are saying the Pope then will be the false prophet of Revelations 19. Brothers and sisters, that is a complete abstract of the interpretation of what the Bible portrays. I'll not get this done this morning, but we're dealing with it from history. And I want to say this, I'll say it with respect to anybody and all that might hear it on video or cassette tape. I got as many histories in my library as any of you out there that will listen. I don't care how many plaques you got on the wall, how many degrees of theology you've got. Because the histories that have been written are records of true things in the past. We're going to have to read them all the same and come up with the same conclusion. Now let me read to you just a short sketch here from what this man says. Then we will see if this lines up with the Bible. The Holy Roman Empire was founded when Pope Leo III placed the crown on the head of Charlemagne. We have printed that and put it in the contender. In 800 AD. He pronounced him Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire has risen and fallen a number of times since then. The empire has always been headed by a political leader, and I will differ with this, from Europe, and a spiritual leader from Italy. That only run that way, brothers and sisters, until we come to the 9th century. After that, every political leader in Italy or anywhere else in Europe was only a figurehead. It was the Pope himself who cracked the whip, who said jump. It was the Pope himself whose statesman from every nation would hold his horse and guide his foot into the stirrup as he would mount. Imagine him doing Paul that way. Imagine him doing Peter that way. Let me continue on here. The Bible prophesies one more revival of the Holy Roman Empire. Again, this empire will be led by a political leader and a spiritual leader. The book of Revelation describes these two end-time leaders as the Antichrist, that he attaches to the beast, and the false prophet of Revelations 19 and 19 and 20. The political leader will be the Antichrist, and the spiritual leader, the Pope, will be the false prophet. got following their brothers and sisters a category of these Catholic fortune tellers giving you all kinds of prophecies. And it is a fact. The Catholic Church now is putting out numerous tracts and things that there's supposed to be an evil pope in the end time. Even the present pope we've got has said it publicly and made it known to a lot of these so-called preachers that go there to have, we will say, a council with him. There's coming one on the scene, the next one he says will be a rascal. Now I'll just leave that as it is. But we want to look at this strictly from what the Bible said about this particular character. He's given all of these different identities. Hardly any one set of scriptures speak of him in the same language and give him the same scope. But when you analyze it all together, and we close out in the 17th chapter book of Revelation, you're dealing with one man under one spirit, and that's the spirit of Antichrist, and the one man fulfills it all. There is not two. As we turn to the 7th chapter of Daniel, this is the series of visions that he had. In this, Daniel was shown there would be 4 world beasts that would stand out in time. Daniel already lived when the first beast, world power, was in motion and in power. It was the Babylonian. I want to remind the listeners and the viewers, however they want to look at it, 2 of these beasts is referred to as city beast, meaning the power of it originates from one city. The Babylonian Empire was a power originated from one city that has reached out through its power and annexed and took by conquering many territories. The next 2 beasts that followed were not city empires. They were not named after cities. They were named after people, nation. The Persian Empire was a combination of the Medes and Persians that was brought about by a royal marriage between the son of one and the daughter of another that united the Medes and Persians together. And just for your sake of understanding, during the Gulf War we heard much about the Kurds, an isolated mountain element of people in the northern part of Iraq, lays over next Persia. The Iraqis today are the descendants of the ancient Medes, while Iran itself is the larger identity of what used to be Persia. The Iranians are the ancient Persians. The Grecians came next. These are a people empire named after the Grecian period. Has no city mentioned to it at all. But when we come to the 4th world beast empire, again it turns back to a city empire. This means that somewhere through time, this city itself would stand out as the sole center of governmental control of a vast territory of the world. And we will see when we come to the last prophecy in the 17th chapter of Revelation, time returns again to the city of Rome. So it's not the whole globe world being divided up into 10-horned territories like some of the modernists are saying, with certain Roman characteristics administering the government. That's deviating from the original vision that Daniel had. Because once these beasts come into existence, they hold their characteristic identity all the way through until they meet their end. It just don't evolve from one kind of an identity
that has certain territories in mind, and then leave that and go completely over here and incorporate a whole bunch of other stuff and still try to tie it to that. Now then, we're going to read. We're going to read the fourth vision of the fourth beast that Daniel saw. Young and old, I know everyone in here, if you ever went to school at all, you had to take a certain amount of history. You had to understand, you had to study a certain amount of European history. Daniel is still living at the time the Babylonian, the first one, is in power. He's saw the second one come in. He saw the third one come in. Now he sees the fourth one come into existence. He gives it a very unique description. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Territorial-wise in history, it's talking about Rome. The horn-wise is talking about the 10 major nations that the continent of Europe began to be broken up into after the Roman city imperial government did begin to lose its power and influence over these vast territories. In the 8th verse, it goes into another description. I considered the horns, and behold, now the horns are symbolic of how this ancient European territory, through the process of time as Rome would rule, and you can see here the description of the Roman Empire, what it was at its great. You can see in small print certain names like Germany and things of that nature, but they don't stand out vividly. You see a territory ruled from a city one time, and it was an imperial government that the Romans had formulated and put together. That's the type of government was in power when Christ was born. But there's something about the horns here. They came along later. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Well, if you was watching actually something alive, growing, coming into existence like that, I'm sure we would think, well, that this other little horn coming, it's going to be another one just like the other 10. That's the way it looks by just looking at an object that God is using to illustrate something other that's going to be territorial, geographic. Now it says here, this little horn came up among them, and it said, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. This man who writes this article, he says that in the end time, in the New World Order government, there will come about a division. And this man of sin, the Antichrist, he is going to cause 3 of these 10 horns to be subdued and lose their identity. Now, brothers and sisters, see, they're putting it yet in the future tense. But keep in mind, Revelations, the 17th chapter, says this. In the 7th and 8th verses, as John was watching the beast, which is the old Roman period under Catholicism, and the 10 horns, and it had 7 heads. And it called it, I will show you the beast that was and is not. Rome was the ancient beast that ruled for many, many years. Then beginning along about 400 and something, we'll just start saying 500. By this time, the political system of Roman imperial government is collapsing. We've done covered that in some of our articles. The rise of the Pope of Rome begins to come up. We will find this same territory that once was ruled by imperial Roman government, the same territory now begins to be ruled by the Vatican. It's ecclesiastical church government taking over the last form of imperial government. And for 1,000 years, Rome walked and existed at the dictates of papal power. I'm not even going to read history this time. It's all in these other articles. You can go to them and get it. History is full of things that the popes in that period of time said, what God had gave them and called them to do and to be. It plainly shows you in history that the Vatican, the power of the Pope, literally rose up. And the King of Germany, Henry I, and King Barbarossa of Italy, and King Francis of France were the 3 kings that the papal power ordered a complete shutdown of all activity of government, monetary, social process. I will say this, according to Daniel and according to Revelation, this man of sin, as he comes on in the end time to finish the total picture, will not have to subdue any horns at all. He's only given a return of the same territorial, because scattered through that is the fragment and the representation of the Catholic Church. Here just a few weeks back, our president goes over there to have a big meeting with NATO. If you listen to the news, you could not have helped but observe what went on. He was doing in NATO what other presidents had done back in the 50s and the 60s as they strengthened NATO. NATO was a military means by how, after the close of World War II, Europe was eventually blended and melted and sealed together by a military agreement for the sole purpose for survival and protection. NATO became the means how eventually then the European Common Market grew out of that. That was the economic process. Out of that has come a European currency today, which each nation is getting ready to embrace it. NATO at this time has agreed to accept other nations in the East, Eastern Europe, which at one time was in the Warsaw Pact of Russia. Russia has joined NATO. Some of the same nations. All of this is a political and a military means to help unite these ancient territories, working its way back where, brothers and sisters, when we read the finished picture in the 13th chapter of Revelation, it had the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion, it had a body like a leopard. That's taken in all the territories of the three beasts that preceded it. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, the territories are gradually uniting under the pretense to work about trade and peace, and NATO is a shelter by how each one is to be sheltered in the process of this gradual growth. By the time, brothers and sisters, it is time for the Pope, the Antichrist, to really be introduced into his week of time, when he will fulfill. Keep in mind, he does not have to run for an election. He does not have to make any political changes in the agenda as to the territory he will have jurisdiction over. All of that will have been masterminded by the devil, who's using apostate politicians, power-crazed men who have one thing in mind, but little do they realize it's all going to wind up just exactly the way God wants it to be. Now then, let's continue on here. In this, it talks about this horn. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man. So this gives it a human characteristic, and a mouth speaking great things. So the eyes and the mouth is not two different men. It is one man who has the eyes and the mouth to speak great things. Now let us go on down in the 23rd verse. The angel is going to describe to Daniel. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth. It has always been that way. Just the fact there's been a period of time in which it was wounded, and the world forgot about what Rome used to be in that of the world rulership, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour. Now listen to this. This is where they get this universal one-world order. Shall devour the whole earth and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. That's not the language of a universal planetary control. Anybody that's read any history knows good and well this, as far as the Romans went east. If you can bring me a history book that shows me where India, Burma, Afghanistan, and those places was ruled by the Romans, then I want to see that history. I'll change my view. Each one of these lower pictures here shows you the different stages of Roman rule and territory in its time. But they all portray Europe and the Middle East. In fact, that's the prophetic earth. What you read about, brothers and sisters, in India and Burma and China and Japan and all that, that's not the prophetic earth. You're looking at a global, planetary earth in that sense of the word. But this whole thing, the whole earth, the whole world, is speaking specifically of the prophetic earth, because it's in the heart of the earth, where Israel and the Middle East is at. That's where the Bible came from. That's where civilization started. All histories are written in and around that part of the earth. With this in mind, let's continue on. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings. They made their appearance through that long period called the Dark Ages. Territory-wise, they gradually, as Rome weakened its imperial hold, this gave these different races of people in the different geographical territories of Europe an opportunity to withdraw from the power of the imperial system and to establish their own identity as a race and as a nation of people with their own kingdom and political means to rule it. It didn't all span up in a day's time. Over a process of time, they all got their identity on the continent. That's why they represent 10 horns fastened to the head of this old Roman system. And another shall rise after them. After the 10 then got their geographical identity, then here comes that little horn that come up and magnified itself, far exceeded the 10, and that shows the power of the rising of the Catholic Church. When I say that, I'm not talking about a Catholic person. I'm talking about the system of Catholicism. How history has declared that from the Vatican, from the office of the Pope, came the changing of things that the Roman territories at one time looked upon as Roman law. It became changed, and the Vatican cracked the whip, and nations began to crumble, and they had to absolutely forfeit their authority. As we continue on. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. This is what he'll do in the tribulation period, as he deals with the Jewish saints in the tribulation. And think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. That's the last 3.5 years of Daniel's week. Here is an article, just came this week, in Newsweek. The millennium, the year 2000, according to the present calendar we have now, which is an old calendar based on Roman records, goes back to the old Julius period. Right in here it tells you your different men who, under the direction of the Catholic Church, was given authority to correct the Roman calendar, to correlate it, and bring it into perspective time setting, and thereby establish what we know today as AD, which doesn't mean after death. It means after the advent of Christ, starting with the proximity of what they could calculate as being the birth of Christ. Because before that, brothers and sisters, all world histories were written by men of different nations as they write to correlate time that is regulated by that kingdom. There was no universal historians 500 years before Christ. Historians that came along later goes back and searches the records. And by searching the records of Babylon, Egypt, Syria, Persia, it's then they began to put together certain fragmentary records of what we would call universal histories. But up to that time, all records of history was written as it starts with the rise of that empire. Go to the book of Kings. How do you read the records of time with the Jews? It tells you there, on the first year of King such and such, on such and such a day of the month, such and such a thing took place. You follow that right straight down through the writings of Kings and the book of Chronicles. That's the way histories for nations and races of people was recorded. Therefore, the Catholic Church, using the old framework of the old Roman calendar, this is why, brothers and sisters, it's what this horn did right here in the Middle Ages, and what he is still doing, and there's no doubt, brothers and sisters, he's got a few more things on the agenda he will do in that dark tribulation hour. Because then's when he's really to speak evil things against the Most High. Now the world today, brothers and sisters, if you talk to Protestantism in the major sense, they are so sound asleep and dead They don't see a thing wrong with this baby kissing, Pope loving person. He's such a sweet, little hubby-dubby type of a man. They say, well, what's wrong with the Pope? Look how kind he is. This man may be that, as you see him. But there's been others, brothers and sisters. John Dillinger would have been a saint compared to them. And too many American Protestants are just too downright lazy to even go to a library and take time to read the records. I have to say that. They're ornery and lazy because they don't want to believe it. It can't be so. That's why through time in some nations, brothers and sisters, you won't find these history books that describe the papacy in the Middle Ages. The Catholic Church has saw to it that many of those libraries have absolutely been confiscated. All those valuable books of history and records have been taken away. But I just hold this up before your eyes. In here it tells what monk in 400 and something, just before the 500 period, how he was authorized by the papacy to start calculating and to come up with a calendar. Then it tells another man who has done more records with the Roman calendar that the whole Western world goes by today. So, brothers and sisters, we could be closer to the year 2000 than we really think. I'm not standing here and say whether we are or we aren't. When I read this week, it let me know what the Catholic Church has done. He shall seek to change times, laws, and seasons. Now, I know the Pope can't make the sun rise and set. But when it says he can change times, laws, and seasons, you have to realize, when you really study the Roman calendar, day starts at the middle of the night. No other calendar in the world does that. The Hebrew calendar starts at sunset. The 12 dark hours precede the 12 daylight hours. And of course that fluctuates as the sun rotates and goes backwards and forwards. Now just so much for that. Now here in this what we've read, this is calling him a horn. Because the horn speaks of the power he will come up with. If you will go to history now to see how that came about. When the territories laying out here in the geographical areas of Europe, they began to want to get their freedom and their independency away from the political powers of the Roman government. Rome began to be invaded by guerrilla armies, trying to weaken. It's a known fact, brothers and sisters, Roman politicians began to play on the influence of the Pope in Rome to use his influence, because in all of these territories many people have been converted to Christianity. So therefore it was a means and a way for the Pope of Rome to play on the sympathy of the believing element within those nations to get them to comply and to go along with his plan. This is how, brothers and sisters, from one pope to another. One time he's only looked upon as a bishop over that of the church. But then when political men began to pull on him for his influence, this began to feed into the papal ego. And each pope began to take advantage of this opportunity to express his ego. So by the time, brothers and sisters, we come then to where Pope Leo, he crowned Charlemagne the great leader of Germany. That was the beginning, brothers and sisters, where he put the church and the state on equal footing. Actually, brothers and sisters, it really married the church. Because it was under Charlemagne then that he became such an admirer of the Pope, with then armies of Christians. He went throughout the various nations of Europe, forcing and compelling every subject to be a believer. By the time we come to 900 and something, Charlemagne's out of the picture. The next pope that comes on the scene, he's the man, brothers and sisters, that begin to elevate himself above Charlemagne and any other pope. From then on, brothers and sisters, the next 500 years till the Reformation struck, you read the real histories of what that pope did. They cracked the whip. Every king of Europe had to bow to his dictates. It was in that period of time that 3 kings was excommunicated from their political seat. They had to make their way over the Alps and stand and make repentance, confessing apologies to the Pope of Rome. And I have to say this from the Bible standpoint and from history. Somebody show me where the Apostle Peter or the Apostle Paul ever had to make such restitution to gain an opportunity for recognition. That should tell you, brothers and sisters, that the office of the Pope at this time has become a power source in Europe. It dominated the whole area of what we call Western Europe, the power of the papacy. Now then, let's go to the 9th chapter and let's see what he's called. In the 9th chapter, Daniel is being shown the structure of the history of time as it is broken up into the periods of what is called the 70 weeks of Daniel. In the 26th verse, I will read this 26th verse, because here's a prophecy that deals with the place of origin, where he comes from, this evil man. We've got those today that says, well, the Bible says the Antichrist is going to be a Syrian. It does not say that. Some have said now here of late, well, because of the evil king in Daniel 11, he's going to be a Jew, an apostate Jew. That don't even make it a fact at all. They take that from the verse of Scripture in Daniel, the 11th chapter, where this evil king shall not observe or worship the God of his fathers, but shall worship a strange God. Modern man has made himself a material God. Education, science, monetary progress. And you give him absolutely a bank and all the scientific knowledge of science piled with it. You turn him loose, brothers and sisters, he becomes a power idiot. That's why we've got politicians in U.S. government today. Through the power of politics, they are leading our nation down the drain to a slow death. They are. Because give them the wealth, give them the modern technology of modern science, and to them they need no more. In actuality, brothers and sisters, I don't want to speak naive about progress. I thank God for progress. I'm not going to be like the old farmer. When the old Fortune tractor used to begin to come on the scene at the turn of the 20th century, and old farmers just used to stand back and look at that thing as it growled its way across the field. Well, it don't give off no manure. Listen to what I'm saying. Look at them big wide tracks it makes. It's going to pack the ground. Well, that's modern age of technology in infancy. But it wasn't long that them old tractors changed. They had more power, they had rubber tires. And by the time World War II is over, I've seen horses shipped to the dog killers, and at one time it looked like there would never be another horse grazing in the pastures of America. Everything went mechanized. From the old threshing machines, when horse-drawn wagons would pull the grain in to be threshed, or where there's corn to be shredded. Progress moves on. But the sad part of it is, man don't want to stop and give God thanks for nothing. With this progress, he becomes power crazy. He puts more confidence in science, technology, and money, and materialism. And that's what that evil king in Daniel 11 does. He serves the god of silver and gold and materialism. If you will look at it right, brothers and sisters, that's why that Pope is seen as the false prophet in the 19th chapter of Revelations, when it says, and he saw the beast. That's the old European system restored for the last days of time. And in the final hours of the prophetic fulfillment, when Jesus Christ is making his descent and his army to the earth, you see this beast system, which shows the whole modern era of mankind had become scientifically modern. There is no God. There is no God. The only God I want is the God of materialism. Money, science, technology. What else do we need? And the Antichrist, which is the false prophet, is leading the way to fight against. All of this adds up to this. By the time, brothers and sisters, that hour of time has rolled around, the Pope will no longer be that kissing baby Pope. He's going to be a man of hate. I'm going to show you how it'll be. Yes, because when the world and its political structure has finally turned the rulership all over to it for a period of time, then it says that he will make a covenant with many. That's strictly economics, peace, and trade. That's the three things that he will have at his fingertip. Now I want to ask you something, brothers and sisters. You look at the Pope now, who Billy Graham said, the most righteous man on the face of this earth. A spiritual man. And here you see him making his speeches. Let him sit in the Vatican looking across the Mediterranean at night, where all the world's media is there observing what the two prophets of Israel is doing, and how they're smiting the earth with curses, and they're going to have to look at the power of God the way it is displayed then. Brothers and sisters, that's going to strip from any pope the idea that he even has the right religion. How many understand what I mean? Yes, he thinks pretty good up to that time, but when these two prophets begin to show the world, we are the ones that's representing God. We are the ones that's got his authority to smite this earth with plagues. And now this shows the Pope he has no power. By the time he sits there and watches this for 3 years and a half, and he can see his old methods of the mass and all of these going down the drain, do you think he's going to give up without a fight? No, sir. It shows, brothers and sisters, just as Judas was filled instantly with the power of Satan, he betrayed him. That spirit of the devil is going to enter that man, and the longer he looks at that kind of a picture across the Mediterranean, the madder he's going to get. Oh, fix that bunch of devils. Because at that time, think of it, he's got a European army that's got the equipment of modern technological warfare, laser beams, all of this stuff. By the time the middle of the week comes, and then he says, I say to the world, who's got a God that's more powerful than that? But really it's the devil. Because the devil lives in progress. When it goes beyond man's proper ways of looking at it. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. I don't want to be naive and an idiot. But you've got to understand how modern man thinks about things. This lets you know, with that modern military means at his disposal, he'll cross that Mediterranean and enter the Holy Land, brothers and sisters. And it says in the latter part of the 12th chapter, when he has the power to scatter the holy people, the first thing he'll do, he'll show the world, these guys ain't got nothing, and he kills them. And lets them lay there in the streets. Now let the media take pictures. Let them show that to the end of the earth. Sure, modern man will say, hey, if them guys got so much, why didn't they stop that? That's exactly why then the Pope can go and set himself up in the restored temple of Jerusalem. Now then, you come and adore me as a God. But it's the God of material, science, and all the other technology that modern man thinks of. Because when you see the final conflict, brothers and sisters, in the 19th chapter, it goes to show the whole entire earth, the beast and all the nations of the earth, are gathered to make war against who? Jesus. And against his army. Because they're going to think this is just an invasion from outer space. Or it's an invasion from the spirit world. And what does it say, brothers and sisters? In the 17th chapter, it says, for the army that's with him are the called, the chosen, and the faithful. You're going to be with him. Now then, with this in mind then, we read here in the 26th verse. Here's another description of this character, who eventually is the man of sin, the lawless one. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince, notice it's spelled in the little p, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. That was fulfilled in 69, 70 AD, by the Roman armies. They were the people. Now this verse of Scripture, in the study of the Antichrist or false prophet, whatever you call, this verse is important because it establishes from what geographical area of authority does this evil character come from. This Pope's a Polish man. But the point is this. His authority does not lay in the virtue that he's a Pole, any more than if he was an Austrian or a Hungarian or Czechoslovakian. It lays in the authority that he has been elevated by the Board of Cardinals to be the successor to the preceding Pope. Therefore, he's supposed to be invested then with all the ancient authority that the popes that preceded him. Even they say goes back to Peter, but that's not so. Because Peter never was a pope. Peter was never carried around in a chair on poles. If Peter was ever on any kind of vehicle, it was a horse-drawn or an ox-drawn cart or something of that nature. I can't see Peter or Paul, either one, allowing themselves to be carried around in a chair, to be adored like that as a figure. But my point is this. The people that tore the city of Jerusalem down, that fulfilled this, were Romans. Their authority came from Rome. Therefore, that establishes the fact that the Antichrist, he must come from a Roman position of authority. I've heard people say, well, the Bible says that Judas Iscariot is going to be raised from the dead. See, because in the 17th chapter of St. John, Jesus called him the son of perdition, never realizing what that title is implying. The son of perdition, what does it mean? And see, if we want to interpret one scripture, well, there's a man that fulfills that, here's another man fulfills this, here's another man fulfills this, and on, we can wind up here 8 or 9 or 10 of them. But this is one man has all of these titles attributed to him. We've got to understand, it is from what angle and by what means of authority is he executing to fulfill his role. When Jesus referring to Judas, which is except the son of perdition, that the scriptures might be fulfilled. Because we know when Satan entered Judas and put that evil thought in his heart and mind to go out and to betray his master for 30 pieces of silver, he became an instrument in the hand of Satan to lead something through deception to destruction. That's what he did. Because the devil, using this means, he became a tool to be used to destroy the Messiah. But then what did the devil do to man when it was all over? It destroyed him too. Because he went out and hung himself. Another writing says he went out and he just jumped off of a cliff. And his insides just burst out. Whichever you want to use. The son of perdition is still talking about the same type of an evil character. Because he becomes the instrument in which he's anointed of the devil to carry out such hatred and fulfill all those things. That's according to that identity. That's why when you get into Revelations, the 17th chapter, and it's talking about the beast that was and is not. Keep in mind, it was the Roman Empire, territory-wise. But in time, this became known as the era of the earth that had the 10 horns, the 10 nations of Europe. Still rule and control from Rome. Yes, it's true. It lost a lot of this. But don't forget, in the end time, when the Antichrist will rule and reign to finish out the book of Revelations, them territories will all be forced by trade, economics, and peace on their part, the way they want it, will be forced to join the League of Nations. Now, I'm not talking about an ancient league that was back in World War I and such like. It's absolutely a combination of these nations coming together, designed, we will say, by the Antichrist system. And with this type of a coming together, brothers and sisters, you can see why then. By the time that is all completed, yes, here's where the 10 horns are at. From out of Romans where the 7 heads are at. But here's the body of it, coming right back through the ancient Grecian territories. Here's the feet of a bear, Irania. Here's Mesopotamia. All of that's in here. But then it had the mouth of a lion. The first beast was the devil speaking through it. The last beast is going to be the devil speaking through it. It's been the devil in every one of them. But it goes to show. The fourth one is the last embodiment of satanic power that God will allow this earth to ever be dominated by. With this in mind, the word prince stands out so vividly here. The people of the prince that's to come, which was a future. That goes to show there will be a man come that's looked upon as, we will say, from royalty. He is a Prince of Peace, because the word prince means ambassador of peace. And the Antichrist, the false prophet, to the world in general in the last days, that's what he's to be. He's to be the ambassador of peace. With this in mind, then, brothers and sisters, let's move quickly to Daniel 11. Daniel was being given the description of the Grecian Empire. We come to a precise time in the Grecian Empire when the era of Syria, which was part of the ancient empire itself, as the Grecian Empire began to disintegrate from its original political powership, a man within Syria rose up by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes. He characterized certain evil traits of hate toward the Jewish people. When you read the histories from the secular side of things, one time he entered Jerusalem because the Jews had shut him away from the temple. He opened up on the Jews with such a hate. He forced his way into the temple. He offered a sow upon the altar. He pushed his way into the Holy of Holies. And then he forbid the Jews to go on circumcising their male children. And he forced some of the Jews to eat swine's flesh. This was his evil hate that he had against the Jewish people. It was his way. I'll show you who has the power to make you do what I want you to do. That characterized in type what the man of sin will do in his hour. All because it's described from that model of what Antiochus Epiphanes did. When we come down to the 36th verse, up till that, the history is talking about Epiphanes. But now then, the thought of the history, or the prophecy, jumps that to the end time. And the king shall do according to his will, meaning nobody tells him what to do. And he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. That's where the Apostle Paul got his revelation when he wrote 2 Thessalonians. By saying he will set himself up in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, demanding the whole world. And shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, meaning until the tribulation period is over. For that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Now see, all of this is talking about an evil man that's got a lot of built-up hatred in him. And he's literally going to come on strong against Israel. But from the setting, what this system the angel is describing to Daniel, it gives the reader the thought, well, this man must come out of Syria. That does not mean that at all. It's because the thought has jumped Antiochus and goes to the end time. And when you go to the end time, you've got to take that back, brothers and sisters, and put it in the Roman days. Goes to show, brothers and sisters, the spirit of Satan that's been characterized through types, through certain systems that characterize this spirit, yet that passes on through time. And at the time of the end, then yes, there's going to be one particular man. You don't have to be a Jew. You don't have to be a Syrian. You don't necessarily have to be a Roman as far as race. But he will have to have Rome as his origin and seat of authority. And let me say this to those who want to still hold to this New World Order. If you think for 1 minute that the New World Order will ever delegate any particular of any kind of authority just to Rome itself to be ruled by a bunch of politicians. You look up here in New York City. There's a great big building up there. United Nations building. General Assembly. That thing's been standing there almost 50 years. And they've come from every nation under the sun. They've been given political recognition. And our country has allowed these nations to send a political, we will say, envoys, emissaries of different ranks of authority. And we give them political immunity, meaning they can park anywhere they want to, and the police can't write them tickets. But you American, you park your little car anywhere that says no parking, and they will pick your car up, cart it off, and you might have to go to court to get it back. I have to say, brothers and sisters, that's downright wrong. All of that just goes to show you there's a few power-crazed men in this world. They're not all in America. But they rule the earth as much as they can. And they want everybody else to recognize for the importance of what the role they play. I've read in this Newsweek here in previous months, there's one particular Russian envoy over here. It told how many speeding tickets that he'd been given. And he'd been drunk driving. Now you know and I know, brothers and sisters, here in America, we've got an organization now that is strong against this driving while under the influence of being intoxicated. But this thing, brothers and sisters, when a foreign envoy is caught by state troopers driving under the influence of liquor, and all because our government has given them immunity, you see the conflict it sets up. And I'm saying these things only to say this, brothers and sisters. If this thing all falls down to a one-world government like the new world order is supposed to be, yes, there will be different centers throughout the world by which certain branches of the government will no doubt originate from. But when this Roman beast system is restored, it's going to be exclusively Rome all the way. It's going to be Rome all the way. And that king, whatever race he is, you've got to keep in mind, he's going to be the same thing that was, and I'm going to describe this when you turn to the 17th chapter. John was shown, as the angel said, come hither, and I will show thee the judgment of the great whore. He was carried into the wilderness, and he saw the scarlet-colored beast, the same ancient Roman territory that ruled in the Dark Ages. When you read it and look at it, brothers and sisters, that's not 2010 description of something that just has a beginning then. What you read here in Revelations 13 and 17 is a picture of what the Roman Empire was in the past. It was. It was. Now notice the word. And is not. It means there came a time when it could not be seen as the original power source that ruled a certain area of the earth. Where does that fit into the chronology of history? The Reformation. That's why the Reformation was used by God. And we can say it's lasted approximately 500 years. That's why when we do see it restored and coming back again, in the 13th chapter, the same beast that was, as it comes back again, he noticed it had a head that was wounded. Now that ought to tell every preacher. Don't look at it from the standpoint that it's something new in the making. It's something coming back that once was. That's the only way you can interpret it. It once was, but it had a time factor that it wasn't. Therefore, that's the Reformation period. But then when it is restored, it will be restored precisely, exactly like when it received the wound. And therefore, brothers and sisters, that's why I have to say, somewhere up the road, God is going to let something develop, whether in this country or the Middle East, that's going to tear the political and the monetary means for man to put together a new world order. And when God gets through shaking him and tearing his playhouse down, now God will say to the devil, now you put it together. Keep in mind, the devil can't do nothing only what God allows him to do. Heavenly Father, I pray this morning, take these words and use them as you see fit. But help us, Lord, to see in reality that your word is true. Lord, we realize we're approaching the end. It's looming upon us. It's coming over the horizon at us. And Lord, the world is sound asleep. Help us, Lord, to be alert. And God, give us wisdom to see the hour of time we now live in. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. May the Lord bless every one of you.